Hello, my name is Jane, and I'm a member of the Soshimsa Zen Center. If you haven't heard, one of the many benefits of our Zen Center is a weekly podcast entitled The World Through Zen Eyes. You can find it on the soshimsa.org website. Just click on the podcast page. It's a conversation between our abbot, the Venerable Myong-an Sunam, and Dr. Ruben Lambert, a Buddhist monk. The subjects of their conversation vary from week to week and are often suggested by listeners. Our hosts discuss life questions and concerns within the timeless wisdom of the Buddha. Their discussions are friendly and informal, peppered with humor and personal experiences. We hope you enjoy the lively conversation and benefit from the wisdom of our hosts. Don't forget to listen for the notification on your phone reminding you that the podcast is ready. And thank you for your support.
Welcome back to another episode of the World Through Zen Eyes podcast. I'm Myung-an Sunam here with...
I'm Dr. Ruben Lambert.
Welcome back. 4th of July.
Yes,
today.
Independence Day, a day of freedom.
Right.
It's a special day because that's kind of like what we're doing, right? We're trying to help people liberate themselves from the tethers that bind them to the things that make them suffer, greed, anger, things that hold you back and keep you in place from being successful in your life. So it's kind of like symbolic, I think, that we're here on the 4th of July because we are freedom fighters too, to a certain extent.
From the pure kind of Zen perspective, we say one shouldn't even mention the word freedom until one is free from bonne, from the habitual sort of functions of the mind, from the worries and anxieties, all of those things. And until then, the word freedom really is rather superficial.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what that means. And we don't know what that means truly until a certain level of meditative absorption, actually. It's not even the Chosun Samme, not even the first Samme. So it is...
I guess right now we just get snapshots of that. It's sort of like not even...
Nothing. We get nothing. The idea of freedom that we have within our lives... is because then I guess the question must be asked: freedom from what? Right.
Well, right.
And so freedom in its sort of pure word meaning, it's to be free within a dome, a domicile, right? A kingdom or some kind of a dome. So there's a set of boundaries, and within which we could act sort of freely. So it's not, otherwise it would just be anarchy. And
right.
So freedom is, we are free,
but you're within the sphere of a certain set of
rules and regulations that we agreed upon. Yeah. But as far as psychologically speaking, the freedom, the idea of freedom is... we truly have no idea of the meaning of the word.
I guess it ties into Kojun Kwanyon, right? And ties into our karma episodes and things of that nature, right? What are the things that feed our consciousness?
Right. And
you have that example, I think, I don't know if it's different streams flowing into a greater ocean or different wires and things like that, like all feeding one.
Right.
And we're not even aware of where those streams came from.
No.
Right.
And we're so much at the mercy of see what we think.
Whoa, that was...
Okay, we think.
I feel like that was like those infinity mirrors, like one layer building upon another layer, just
Well, it's more like the carnival mirrors, the ones that warp and bend, and
Yes.
Yeah.
Ah, where you think you're seeing a
Right.
reflection, but what you don't see is that the mirror at this time was warped, right?
Yeah, that's right. We think, but I mean, to what degree do we suffer confirmation bias? To what degree are we driven unconsciously by the mechanisms of our habit or karma, etc., etc.? We think, oh, I had a thought. If we trace the building blocks of the thought, it's just cobbled together from the experience and a very limited experience of a person. Right? No one, the proclivity of the mind to skew towards that which we know, because otherwise it can't skew towards something we don't know. So it skews only towards something that we know. So it's just, and then if you've considered the incoming new information, whatever that information may be, it passes through a filtration system of like you said, 고정관념, our fixed preconceived notions, etc., etc., and it ends up being just, do I agree or disagree? Right? And do I agree equates to, does it match my already established viewpoint, my already established paradigm, my already established identity, my already established self-identity,
That point you're making feels to me like it's almost the heart of all conflict in life, whether it's because when you're having a conversation, are you truly having a conversation or discussion, or are you trying to mold that person into matching what you're already thinking? You know very well, we've talked about this, that some people ask questions, they don't really want answers. They just want you to...
Right, they're either combative questions, sort of challenge questions, or they just want confirmation.
They want you to confirm what they're already thinking or believing, right? And also when you walk out into the world, how many things don't match what you wish for at this very moment? And I think that's the seed of what? Complaining.
Mm-hmm. That's why when freedom is a real thing that one has, there's no complaining.
Right.
Right.
I guess we can use that Altair as a measure of how far along you've traveled, right? Did a complaint arise in your mind about something? Well, then you still got more work to do.
Mm-hmm. There's no complaining. There's no anger. Right? Because they are all just, it isn't how I want it to be. Right? So we're bound somehow. And not only are we bound, but we then are forced to have an emotional response to a thing, or a violent response to a thing, or what have you. So we are, to a large degree, a puppet.
You're just pulled. You, in my mind, like this metaphor rose, like this image of someone, you can walk, let's say, to the park, or you could be pulled violently into, let's say, a workout gym, and you don't want to be there working out, right? So in one, you're going towards it with happiness, acceptance, complacency, and the other one, it's against your will. And once you arrive in that new destination, all that's going to come is just aggression following that, because you're in a situation you don't want to be in. But like you're saying, like our thoughts come and we're not really fully aware of the course, or the course that it took to get there. So we just react without even knowing. Wow.
Well,
that's,
I'm
sorry. That's, I mean, I hope everyone can just sit with that for a moment. Like,
see, the react element too has so many levels. I mean, on what when you say react, I suspect
I'm thinking lightning flash,
right?
A to B, and then here you are. It's like being dropped into the middle of a movie or something. Like, you have no idea how you got there, right? Like,
yeah, and I think that the experience of that reaction, right, is sufficiently loud enough that if a person has an iota of self-awareness, right, they could note that. This is, wow, I really overreacted usually. Think about it, right?
That's an even more profound point. Go ahead.
Because people say, right, like, oh man, I overreacted, right? So there's the reacted, and then the overreacted is usually what's commented on. I think you're overreacting on this, right? So there's a level of reacted that is okay, I guess, right? And then there's the overreacted, that means you're reacting but too much, right? But we're talking about more subtle things. So overreacted is a very big kind of explosion, like you said, or a lightning flash that draws attention. It's, oh wow, right? But then we have reacted, which is simply, one could say, well, it's just a response to the life around us. I mean, we react to the world, yes. But that could go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, because a reaction is a response to a stimuli of some sort, right? And so we most likely think of reacting to a thing I've seen, heard, or felt,
you smelled something you didn't like.
Yes. So.
And you throw up.
Yeah, so they're externally bound. But, and so with this definition of freedom, it's the same thing. Like, well, am I externally bound? Right? If I'm in shackles, then I haven't the freedom. But there is, and this is where meditation practice makes us befriend our own mind, or at least, right, visit our own mind.
Right.
Because you could be sitting there, and so we have the saying, Mupung Pado, right? Which means no wind but waves. Right? So if we are participating actively in the world and doing things, and the winds of the world are obvious to us for the most part. I see, hear, smell, taste, touch, and those things, make me feel, etc., etc. But then consider a meditating person sitting, perhaps with the lights off, right? Maybe not even incense burning to stimulate the reaction of the,
scent.
Olfactory.
The olfactory bulbs.
The olfactory bulbs. We're not listening to, music, a Tibetan flute or whatever you have. So, in a sense, to a large degree, let's assume that a person could sit for 1 hour without feeling physical discomfort. So from the moment you sit down to the moment that you begin to feel physical discomfort, there isn't a wind. And yet, one is besieged by thought.
An
unwelcome thought.
Unwelcome thoughts.
Yeah. Unwanted thought, because I'm going to sit down, and I tell to myself, I'm going to sit down, and I'm going to focus my mind on an object of the meditation, whatever that object may be. And everything to myself, I'm going to sit down and let's say focus on breath, or focus on counting, or a mantra, or whatever it may be. Let's say I'm meditating on the breath. So I sit down, I say to myself, I'm going to meditate on the breath. And that's
Good
it,
luck.
Right? Well,
Good
if that is if one is free, right?
Right.
Then one is free to make that decision and that be it. But I
that is meditation.
I want to, right? That's what I'm doing actively. This is my decision. I'm going to focus on the breath. Oh, but did I turn off the lights when I left the other room? That you didn't order that thought. You didn't welcome that thought. That thought is an intrusive thought. So
crash the party.
Right. Frequently we think of intrusive thoughts as maybe perhaps some kind of a dark kind of thing, but in its more subtle stages.
It doesn't have to even necessarily be dark, right? If you are leaving to work and you have important things to do there, and you have this thought lingering, did I turn off the stove? That thing,
You're splintered.
yeah, your
Yeah.
mind is not at ease at all.
You're
It's not like,
captive
you know,
of
actual
what?
damage didn't occur yet, right? It's not like someone got hurt or there was an explosion or anything like that. No, it's just a
Right. So the
you know, a
subtlety of
thing,
it
right?
is missed. It's missed. It's
I guess it's
dismissed.
almost like it's also not a one-man band. It's not a one-man show, right? You sit down and you're like, I want to now focus on my breathing. And then somebody stands up and says, I disagree. Who's that? Your nose. What's going on? It's itching. Like now, at a time like this,
Right.
now you want to tell me that you're itching? And then, you know, ankle says, oh, God, you're leaning on me right now. It's been so long. Gosh, can you just move that there? You know, and then plus a barrage of past memories and thoughts and ideas and
Well, and
so
that's the
forth and
thing,
so forth.
right?
You're
So-
not alone
so-
at the party, right?
Yeah, if we start throwing people, throwing the
Kick people
participants out of the
yeah.
party,
You
right?
weren't
So,
invited.
yeah, I'm able to sit, so ankle doesn't complain. I don't have incense or anything, so there's no smell. All of those things. All right, I've thrown out all of
We
those.
could say this is the
people.
Just Breathe party, and you need the Just Breathe invitation. And if you don't have it, sorry, you gotta go.
There you go.
know, right?
Right. So why is last week's interaction with my neighbor all of a sudden kicking the doors in and storming in and helping itself?
How about me?
Right. Yeah.
Right?
And helping itself to my plate.
Oh,
It's
eating
a
off of your dish. Jeez.
yes. So that's not freedom.
No.
But actually, I mean, this is a good topic. We could go with it.
Yeah. Well, I actually wanted you to comment. Hold that thought on the subtle nuances too. That on the way to this ultimate freedom, the subtle nuances that meditation can afford you. Because I remember last week when someone was talking, or was it 2 weeks ago, about the subtle changes that occur with the feeling of anger. You were talking about overreaction and what people notice. Yes, people feel the emotion of anger, but what people are not in tune with are the nuances, right? Where there are hormonal changes, where there are weather changes and things of that sort. And that kind of just speaks to what you were saying earlier, right? Is that people don't have freedom. They're not even aware of how they got there because we're not in tune with those processes. And I think meditation is a tool that allows you to be more wakeful.
And on one level, that's what I mean. That we're dragged.
You're dragged, yeah.
We're dragged by so many various sort of forces, and we rarely consider more than one. Actually,
that's another thing, right?
Because usually we look for justification of a experience. The justification of the experience, if it were a negative experience, usually looking for a place to extend our blame onto. So usually somebody else, something, right? And
right, that can link to the overreaction, right? Someone, my spouse didn't put the cup in the sink. And normally it bothers you, but today you screamed and yelled at him or her. That would be like the overreaction. And then what do we normally do? We blame the cup not being in the sink. But then linking to what I think you're about to expound is we have our habitual reasoning for what is the cause, and we miss. Well, did that day you wake up and your hormones were different? Did that day you wake up and some weather change, barometer pressure or something had an impact on your circulation? Whatever it might be, the energy flow, the key energy and things like that, those things change day to day, moment to moment, right?
Yeah.
And we're not in tune with that. Yet we still, here's Kojunkwanyam, our habitual way of thinking, blame that one thing, that sole thing, and miss.
Because
the
we are,
whole
right,
yeah.
our senses are externally facing. And,
Right.
and we are informed by their presence, right? And we rely on it as one ought to. I'm afraid what happens when we talk of things like this, that some people then jump to the conclusion in a sort of extreme attempt to sort of swing the pendulum in the other way. This is also, we mustn't rely on feelings, and that's not what we're saying, right? Anytime a point is being made, it doesn't deprive of the other end of the thing. We're really trying to highlight the whole spectrum of human experience.
Right. I think people love to put things into extreme categories, and they have a hard time. We say this too all the time, putting two opposing points in balance or in harmony with one another, right? And so they assume if you're talking about the shortcomings of your external senses and the part that people miss, that it means just throw it away.
Yeah.
I don't know. You're not saying that.
No, we're not. It's the point being is that we are, like I said, our senses are externally facing, and as such, this is how we are informed. For the
there's a reason and a purpose for
there's
that.
a reason, purpose, etc. Right. But that renders us sort of an automatic setting. And, if you consider the Buddhist training, and one of the first things, Shinnyom-cho, is this body. Shin is a body. Yom is like awareness. Cho is a place. That's, if you translate verbatim, like the words themselves, that's what they mean. And essentially what it means is bring the attention to yourself. And of course, again, it doesn't mean that you should now have self-deprecating thing, and I'm stupid because I did this, and that's not it. The idea, however, is that perhaps instead of only looking for the why in the outside world, because that's the first place to go with sensory experience, one also must consider the inner world of mind making, my mind making a thing. Right. Is it really such a big deal that the cup? Now there's gonna be rocks thrown at any moment now that I say this, but is it really that the cup wasn't put into in the sink or whatever?
That's a touchy subject.
It is a touchy subject. I'm touching touchy subject. Yeah,
sinks can cause World War III in households.
Sinks and dishwashers, absolutely. Yes. Right. But that's the thing. So hold on, put down the pitchforks and the torches, because I'm not done yet. Is it the end of the world that the cup hasn't been put into the sink or a dishwasher? No, it's not. Is it going to be the end of the world if you put the cup in the dishwasher? No, it's not. Right? So I'm not saying people requesting the other person to put the dishes where the dish is supposed to go is that why not? We can ask the other side, why not put the dishes where they, right? Because the person is so tied up in their ownness, their ego-ness, their selfishness, essentially, is what it is, right? And the idea of consideration is usually, or frequently, or at times, I don't want to offend anyone, but the idea of consideration is something that perhaps comes as a second, third, fourth, fifth, and 10th thought.
Yes.
In the ordering of things.
For the one person getting angry, it's first in line.
Right. And for the other person is seventh in line. And so
that word is hidden. That's why there's so much misunderstanding.
That's why the story, the biblical story of the Tower of Babel is absolutely correct.
That's how we start talking. Kids babble when they...
Kids babble, right. Well, and that's the thing. But do kids babble? No, they're talking.
They're talking, yeah.
Right. And this is again, we are horrible at communication.
Because the person that's mad, here's what they're thinking. That's the 999th time I've had to tell you to put the cup in the sink.
Right.
Right. Another person is...
Wait, so I have a question, perhaps, to this hypothetical person, right?
Yeah, go
So
ahead.
in 999 times...
That's why for them it's the end of the world, because they carry that thought in their mind
Sure.
at that moment. But yeah.
So two points. One, if you on your way to tell the other person that the one time, the 999, so now the 1,000th time, you trip, fell, hit your head, and forgotten that 999 times of their transgressions.
Bam, enlightenment.
Right.
You'd be at peace.
You're free.
You're free of that. Yeah.
On the other hand, right? And I'm just playing to a certain degree devil's advocate, right? But so for the person who told the other person 999 times to not do something, and they continue doing it, how do you see then that person's persistence? Right? I mean, on one hand, the other person was told 999 times to put the cup in the sink, let's say. And they still didn't learn.
Right.
So they're not a very good student. On the other hand, the person has told the other person 999 times. And seeing that the other person hasn't learned, that person is not really a good student. Because didn't you learn your lesson that you told them 999 times and they still didn't do it? On what account, in what logic does one then think this time's going to work? They will now know. They haven't learned in 999 times.
Right, what makes you think?
What makes you think that it's going to work this time? It's an expectation. The expectation that they will. The expectations that they're going to learn. And jumping to conclusion. They're just a dummy, right? Or they're selfish or what have you. And that kind of thing goes both ways. And so what we get is fights and arguments on account of, to swing it back to freedom. The freedom for one person, the freedom to not be so perhaps preoccupied with their own thing, that and note that how important, or it's not even importance, how much helpful, so bodhisattvahood, how much helpful I could be to this other person if I just put this cup where it goes, or where it's easier for them to, if they're doing the washing up and all that. And then on the other hand, right, the freedom for the other person to either reorganize or at least in some grace and mercy understand that the other person, for whatever reason, is just somehow, maybe genetically, maybe, just unable to put the cup in the sink.
Right.
Because then both people are imprisoned and neither one of them is free.
Right.
So
I think
freedom, forget about it.
Forget about it. Do the work. And then
you were saying?
But no, I was saying, like, in that moment, I was thinking some people think to themselves, let's say the person that's angry at the person who didn't put that cup into the sink. It's true, though. They'll argue and say, it's true. I've told them 9,999 times. And for that person that thinks just because it's true, that means that it's some thought or idea that you should continue to carry. Maybe we should ask you to think, well, it might be true, but is it helpful? Is that idea of the past and that record that you've kept, that it's 9,000, was it helpful? And here's the story that I was thinking about, because not everything that's true is helpful. Well, it might be true, it might not be helpful. Remember when we went hiking many moons ago, and there were the Spanish mother and the two daughters, and it was the first time they went hiking. This was in Elizabeth.
Okay.
And, and then you did a pack check before we left, thank goodness, because they were bringing these huge rocks.
Yes.
to hammer down the, what is that called?
Stakes.
The 10 stakes?
Yes.
So I was thinking, that's a situation where it might be true that a rock is very efficient, but it sure as hell ain't damn helpful when you're going on a hike.
Yeah.
right? So that's what you did for them. You're like,
Mhm.
okay, let that go. In the same manner, sometimes I think we got to do like a emotional
Pack check.
And you can't just hold on. Yeah, it might be true. You might,
Well,
but man, sometimes you got to let go of things that
right.
are just not helpful for you.
Well, now let's consider this, right? Let's imagine that the pack is a mind or a head, metaphor.
Yeah, right.
A
Well, the head
skull.
is almost
Yeah.
like a little
It's
sack,
a pack,
right?
right?
It's a sack.
So your hiking pack. We're all going hiking every
Mhm.
day, carrying this backpack, this neck pack, right? This sack, this container, and when making the decision to bring a rock, put a rock in there, right? Is it true? Yes. Is the truth that stakes need nailing in? Yes. And what if it's rocky things? So maybe they had an experience last time and they tried to do it and it didn't work, etc., 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 etc. All of those things can be true. Now, a person ought to look for more truths than just their own individual truth.
Okay,
That is to say, that it is also true that the likelihood of wherever we're going to pitch a tent, there's going to be a rock available within, eye shot.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to, it's true you need something to nail the stakes. It's true a rock will do. It's true you could bring it with you. But it is also true, and this truth now is outside. Right? The truth of another is true. And this is why when we speak to someone and they report on whatever experience of life that they may have, when we measure against only our truth, we deny the other person their truth, and vice versa, right? And so the idea is when listening to a person and recount an experience, of course we have to think, yes, it is true, because it is true. It is their experience.
True to them.
Right. And it is true, therefore. True to them is true.
Right.
True to me, that truth is not true to me, but true to me is it also true. That's why this whole idea of this one kind of a finite truth thing is another fallacy.
Yeah. People can't make that.
Yeah.
So to negate then the individual, this is going to get into, what was One Hill's thing? The essence and the...
Taeyong.
Yeah, that
the function and the
maybe that
essence.
should be a whole other category. But yeah, if you negate people's individual experiences, I think the initial response is just conflict to what we've been talking about, right? You're just completely negating.
Because it's ego. Mine is more true than yours.
Right.
I think George Carlin has that bit about people and their things.
Right. I love his act. Right.
Yeah. My stuff is stuff. Your stuff is
junk.
crap.
Crap. Yeah.
He says another word, but yeah, we're PG.
Yeah.
Right. So my stuff is stuff. Your stuff is crap. And we have storage facilities for my crap because my crap is so much important. It points to
whole
something
industry
true.
is revolving around
Yes,
people's
my
crap.
Yeah. People's stuff. Right.
Right.
Your crap. My stuff. Yeah. And this is how that works. So to mention the word freedom in this context is we haven't the freedom. We haven't the freedom so long as we have that organization of thought, right? That mine is the truth, or mine, I've asked you 999 times to do the thing. I haven't the freedom to move through my day or move through my life without being sort of punished by my refusal to accept some reality, which is that person, even though they were told 999 times, still doesn't get it, right? They just maybe missing that part of the brain, And so we have that.
Because what is the person who is, let's say, knee deep or entrenched in asang, or governed or controlled by ego, and lacks insight or awareness, what are the things that they're noticing? Only the very, very loud things, right? They're not privy to the subtleties of life.
Well, they would
So
argue it's not loud. See, a person might not verbalize it exactly, so they might not say, "Oh, it's not loud. It's what's important." And my stuff is stuff, and your stuff is crap.
So yeah, so
what is important to me?
It's like a spotlight on the stage. You have the option of how this is what you're noticing, because I've deemed this person or this event or this situation to be the main character. So now, spotlight right on that.
Yeah.
This is what's important to me.
What's important is what I declare is important. What is important is what is important to me. This is the function of the ego, right? Asang is ego, right? But means me, or I, or self, right? Sang is an
like
image.
Mm-hmm.
Is kind of an image.
An image.
Yeah.
So that's where the trouble lies. Is the image is something that was created.
Right. So
You created
like a
this
self
image, and when
view,
it doesn't, and then when it doesn't match,
right? It's a self view. It's a self image, and it's not only that it's a self image. It's self image that is sort of adhered to, and kind of really there's a rigor mortis attachment to it, right? So what you get is a CEO of a Fortune 500 company who struts his stuff in a sense, because he there's a position which he serves, but then that image of self that, let's say, it's needed for the situation at work. You're in a board meeting, you have to present, you have to radiate a certain authority vibe, right? But then you can't go home and radiate authority vibe to your family, because you're not a CEO of your family. But
demanding people to
to
see you that way. I'm the
It's not
CEO. Now you have to. That
Hapana.
reminds me of the story. I'm going to put you into it. When you early on first ordained and you became a sunim, and you wanted the sangha, the members of the community, to call you sunim. And you go to our teacher on Sunday and you say,
Wait, hold on. Wait. Okay, wait. Let me tell the story.
Go
Let
ahead.
me tell the story.
Because I took a lesson. I took a lesson from that too, and
It's big. It's a fantastic lesson. We were still in Korea.
All right, there you go.
We're in Korea, and the days leading up to my ordination are coming up.
Yeah,
and I think we had just gone to the tailor to get a set of robes made. So perhaps I was fresh
robes. You got the
robes,
fresh linens
yes.
there.
I
You're
linens
looking
on.
sharp.
Yes.
And
so I went into Unsanim's room, and he's sitting in, we were in a hotel, and he's sitting in a chair, and I sat down on the floor. Mind you, the imagery of this is like the old way, right? You learn at the feet of the guru.
right.
And so I sat there and I say, Unsanim, when we go back to United States, right, I said, nobody knows sunyam, really, what sunyam means. Right? They know reverend, whatever, but nobody knows what sunyam means. So I think we need to sort of teach people the meaning of sunyam. So when we go back, maybe and I think I said, like, are you gonna call me sunyam? Right, which is,
and then I think you wanted it because you wanted everyone to call you sunim.
Right.
So
by
the
example,
parallel point, right?
Yeah. So by example, and so I'm saying, he says, yeah, you want people to call you sunim. I said, for the purpose of education, yes. You want people to call you sunim? Yes. Then do sunim things.
I love it.
That I've never forgotten.
You're looking for this, like, the clouds to part and the light to come down, and I just love how the Zen master can just cut right to the point and touch exactly what you need at that moment to grow.
Right.
But real quick before you go on, but then I, at that time, I think it was 2008, I think 2009, I graduated with my doctorate in psychology, and I took that lesson and I transformed it into a mantra, or in my own head. If I want people to call me doctor, do doctor things, right?
Yeah.
The same thing, right?
Yeah, because that's the thing. It's the titles themselves, right? Are an advertisement.
But it's not asang imposing to what we're talking about too. It's not the asang imposing on others,
Right.
to, do or act a certain way because of my title.
Right.
It's the Hashim humble approach.
Mm-hmm. And
First you do.
sunyam, it's sort of, we sometimes translate as venerable, right? So it's like, essentially like, you want people to venerate you, or you want people to, or honorable or respectable. You want people to see you as respectable, do respectable things.
Exactly.
If you do crook things, people are going to see you as a crook because you do crook things, right?
Right.
If you do X, Y, and Z things, the people are going to see you for that thing. I mean, unless you want to perpetuate, again, some kind of a, clouding their perception with falsehoods and pulling wool over their eyes, etc., etc. So if you want people to see you as you want them to see you, do the things for people to, so people are informed by your action, not by you saying, you call me this. And it was so brilliant. I mean,
that was brilliant. That was a brilliant
moment. People
moment.
call you
Really.
sunim? Do sunim things.
Do sunim things.
Yeah. It's there are absolutely moments like this that just are like splinters in the mind, and they're so impactful and so
you never forget those things.
Hopefully not, because Hashim, right, the humility, right, it is working against, because consider, when in our lives do we, and this is true for anybody, when in our lives do we learn some philosophical lessons of, perhaps of, let's say, humility. You really ought to be humble and respectful of others, etc., etc. And this is different than groveling before other people.
Okay.
But since we're on the subject of how minds tend to respond, if you say humble, sometimes what people hear it as, you are to grovel before someone. Right. So what it seems to suggest is a undermining of self-worth, or my confidence. Confidence and humility are not in conflict to one another. So this idea,
I usually tell people like that. That could be a whole other episode too, right? Because we have to make a clear distinction between groveling and Hashim, all right? And we have people that we encounter that act like they're so humble but really behind the curtain, it's like their head eats up all the oxygen in the room. Yeah. So I guess it's almost sometimes is it a gold-plated effect, right? Like, or a mask effect on the outside, they appear that way, or are they rock solid? Just the same thing with like titles, right? Do you live the title? Did you earn the title, or do you just want people to call you that without doing any of the work associated with it, right? So you put sunim robes on a scarecrow, still a scarecrow, right?
There's a cartoon, I think it's Osam.
Oh, right. I remember the
Korean
cartoon.
Yeah, of a brother and sister, I believe, that are orphaned, and I think she's blind, and they go to a temple or something to that effect, and the young boy is rather mischievous, and one of the monks at the temple is looking for his set of robes, and he can't find them, and he's kind of searching for it, and sees there's a deer wearing the robes. So the little boy had done and put the robes on a deer kind of thing. And this is akin to...
It's a cute image, but it's akin to what we're
Right.
talking about,
Yeah.
right? You know, what deer now? What they can.
Yeah, it is. I think Sam one time said something. I think we're talking about Bengnimsa temple, and he said it's like putting pearls on a pig,
Yeah.
right? And that was kind of the same, but adjacent at least idea.
Mm-hmm.
But when speaking of freedom, on one hand, we have to understand the meaning of the word in context of society. That it isn't just mayhem and anarchy and I'm free to do whatever in the world I please and choose to do. Right? That is anarchy.
Yeah.
That is...
It's a violation of human rights.
Right.
That's the end of that road.
Yeah.
Right?
And so the idea of freedom is that we are free to operate within some confines, really, actually, of some rules. And it's not... Confines is not the right word, maybe. What we are free to do is operate within a set of rules that we have agreed upon.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because
Mutual.
it is a game. It is a game, right? And each country has its own set of rules, and each dimension of life, and each the worldly dimension, sabasege, and the spiritual dimensions have their own sort of rules that govern those realms of existence. And so we've agreed upon something, whether consciously or unconsciously, but we have to recognize this. We agreed on the universal agreement, or at least here, that a red light means that you stop driving, and a green light means that you go or keep driving.
Right.
And
it's a
there's
universal
no
promise that we all make.
right, and there's no super magnetic force and shield
Stopping you.
that's going to stop your car. Right? We stop the car on a red light because we have agreed that then allows the other person to go. Right?
And that creates mutual safety.
That's
Right?
a freedom.
It's a freedom for all to travel.
It's a
without
freedom
getting
for you
hurt.
to not have, right, to not die unnecessarily. It's a freedom for you to not be constantly besieged by fear as you're driving. That at any point in time, it's just this lawless Wild West of an intersection. And if you make it, you call your spouse on the phone, it's like, honey, I'm going through an intersection.
Yeah.
If I make it through,
Yeah, good luck.
let's have
Make sure-
lunch.
Check
Yeah.
if my will is still active, because
know.
this one is a roll
Yeah.
of the dice.
Yeah, so that would be a hellish existence. So there's a freedom within an collectively agreed upon thing. Now, collectively agreed upon is in our current climate is a very different can take on a very different thing, because we can't seem to agree upon many of the points.
Yeah, but then we have that what is that group of bandits point that you can make for society if they get stuck on that, right? Or and someone gave us a metaphor one time. I think we might have been hiking or maybe at Bengnimsa, and he said, look at the trees, right? So two trees were growing towards each other and occupying what looked like they were trying to occupy the same space, but one tree doesn't overtake the other tree. They literally merge and then shoot upwardly side by side. And that was a beautiful imagery for how to almost cohabitate or occupy the same space without one overtaking the other, one empowering the other, one imposing on the other. They knew their limits, knew their boundaries, and both were able to rise up and get the sun that they were looking for.
Well, sometimes the big ones steal the sun and murder off the smaller things,
yes,
or the
that
vine
too.
wraps around and chokes the light out of. So but see, that is also, now we're talking about, there's a natural set of rules and regulations, right? And then there's the man-made.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could look for certain inspirations and certain expressions of nature to apply to our human society, and then on the other hand, try not to be like some of the things. So we have the intellect that makes us, gives us the ability to pick and choose, right? So it's like if you're hungry, you just don't eat the gazelle, right? But then also a lion that's full, the gazelle will come over and step on its tail, and the lion will just, kind of whimper maybe and won't kill the thing because it stepped on its tail. But then you have octopus that band together with fish, so they scare things out, and the fish, so there's like an interaction between octopus and fish, right? But from time to time, for seemingly no reason, scientists still don't know why, the octopus will just punch the fish, boom, right? Whether it's to assert its dominance, right? Because the situation doesn't call for it. Like, it's not like okay, we're working as a team, I'm gonna stick my tentacle into this hole, and then whatever comes out, you get to eat your things and I get to eat my things. And let's say the fish started eating everything off, and the octopus was like, excuse me, this was a partnership.
Right.
So it doesn't seem to be that. Right? So it's almost like maybe just like dominance, or who knows what the octopus thinking. Just check, jab, So we have that pliability, and this is, again, we have to acknowledge and highlight the fact that we have just that we have the ability as human beings to mold ourselves and to rise above and to transcend certain animalistic behavior, certain, and that's the thing. So we have an ego, it does the things that it does, and we practice and train ourselves to understand what it is, what it does, how it does it, when does it, what. And then, because we are human beings, we have the ability to say, I'm not gonna, or I'm gonna, or I'm gonna sort of highlight or develop this one part, and I'm gonna, kind of stop feeding this other part of with its personality quirks or with idiosyncrasies or the way that I am or what have you. So we are really a fantastic creature, but there's a need for understanding, etc., etc. And so we went from the societal to the humanistic, and then now, if we highlight the spiritualistic, if you will, until we can recognize, realize, until some level of spiritual development, the very tender and precise dance of balancing is not available to us. So freedom from that perspective, from the, I don't know, we want to call it higher, transcendent kind of thing, or more subtle, whichever way you want to look at it, wherever you want to place it.
Sublime.
So, yeah, from that standpoint, for us to speak of freedom is not correct. And then for us to further interpret and misinterpret freedom in the context of living in a societal structure as I do what I want, it is also not correct. So we need, of course, as always, wakefulness and knowing where we are. If one truth, it's that rock thing that you brought up. If it's true that rocks are useful for nailing spikes, but it's also true that there are rocks where we're going. And it is also true then that you don't need to bring a rock. And if you continue looking at it, like there are so many truths available to us, and knowing on which truth am I operating, and having that flexibility. Because if I only see the truth of, I need to nail in these spikes, then you fail to see the truth of the place you're going to. And so that's the thing.
Right.
Freedom, in a sense, the best that we could kind of muster up here is the freedom to be able to move from one dimension to the other,
Mm-hmm.
and understand the rules and regulations and the laws and the functions and the what of that said dimension, and operate within it.
In essence, you're saying jihe, or banya,
Jihe, wisdom, yeah.
Right? Develop wisdom.
Right.
I know a wisdom tradition that, helps you develop that, is the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
But so, yes, develop wakefulness so that you can be aware, right? If you're not aware, then you cannot enact any kind of change in your life.
And acknowledge that there are multiple truths, and that need to be viewed,
yes.
and that where to move from one truth to the other with an understanding, not with a kind of I bring my truth into your life and I force feed it to you. That's not a truth, because that's my truth, but it violates the truth that is your truth. And so there's some mutual understanding that is required, some transformative ability, the pliability. And like I said, we are endowed with it by nature, that we have it. But it's not the only truth. The only truth isn't that we're flexible.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the truth that we're very rigid. There's also truth that we're very fixated.
Mm-hmm.
There's also truth that we're attachment prone, and desire prone, and anger prone, and jealousy prone, and whatever. All of those things are truths.
Right.
And knowing within which realm am I operating.
How to navigate through all of those things.
And acknowledging the other side. And then maybe the person that was told 999 times realizes the truth of the fact that that other person who told them so will be happier.
I hope so.
Just that.
I have a million mothers that would be happy if what you say becomes true.
Right. Right. And then the mother then, or somebody else, being able to acknowledge the truth of the other person for whatever reason, right, seems to render them incapable of the simple task. And is it possible that the way that the task was initially presented was the lesson not sufficient for the other person to understand? Was it just, I told you and you do as I told you so? Or is it sort of dominance, right? An imposing of the thing. You put that thing over there, you hear me? You put that thing over there, you hear me? You put that thing over there, you hear me? Right? What if it's like, you helping me by putting this thing, I know it's not a big deal, but it expresses our mutual understanding, our love for one another, that you could put the thing over there, and that's just, sometimes a nice bouquet of flowers on a Wednesday, just out of the blue, is a nice thing. But also sometimes if that cup lands where it's supposed to go, that's a nice thing too. And so maybe we don't know what we think. You don't know what I think, I don't know what you think. And in acknowledgement of that, the only way of communication that we have is external. So it's the verbal or bodily communication. And by doing that thing, it's not about the cup going there. It's about what that means. There's a symbolism to everything in life. And if that cup going in where it makes my life easier, it's a symbolism of you saying you care. Right. And we can go back and forth. So it's freedom from one's only truth and adherence to that truth, regardless and despite of what the other truths may be. That's right. That's the other thing. It ain't freedom. because we're imprisoned by our own thinking, and then our emotional states and our psychological states are then imposed on us because we are not free from being subjugated by the other person's behavior. So freedom, ha, bahamba.
Yeah.
Until next time, I'm Young Ansanim. Take care of yourselves and each other.
I'm Dr. Ruben Lambert from My Heart to Yours. If you like what you heard, please tell someone else about the World Through Zenites podcast and share all the goodness that we are sharing with the world, with others.
Please, topics. Give us topics. Today, by the way, is a 20th episode. So we really never anticipated I was going to say longevity of it, but it is longevity. When initially setting up the podcast platform, one of the things that one is kind of warned is to say that most podcasts die out by like 8 episodes or 10 episodes, whatever the number was. So we're at 20, thanks to our listeners. And again, we're in our little truth.
Yeah.
For us, 20 is a significant thing. Also for us, the fact that we have over 1,000 downloads, that's
great too.
That's a fantastic thing too. Yeah. I'm sure there's podcasts that have 1,000
For some people,
downloads
we're
a day.
stuff.
Who
For some
knows?
people, we're junk. Right.
But that's their truth.
That's their truth.
And this is our truth. And kudos to them.
Listen, progress is progress, and we're going to celebrate these milestones. So,
Indeed.